Hey folks, doing some cylinder work today and currently have, it's probably a mid-80s. I don't know what year these are because they're not marked, but they're very similar, but mid-80s ATC250R. And these versions, basically, there was a CR250R in 70, I want to say 75 or 70, maybe it was 78 to 1980. You could use a piston. And then like 81 to 84 ATC 250Rs, the air-cooled stuff, which this is obviously. They get pretty worn, and these are in, I got a rash of them lately. So I've got this one I'm doing. This other customer, same guy, has these two cylinders. And I have another customer that's got a cylinder that's sleeved back there. That's ready for a standard piston when it gets here. But all of these have, this middle one is actually bored and ready to be honed. It's to 72 millimeters even. And this one's going to be at 71.50. I think this one will probably be around the same. He honed them just to see if he can clean them up. But as you'll see in a second here, these things, they have a lot of wear over time. And we'll start the cut. A little bit of an interrupted cut because of back there. I don't know if somebody dinged it with a hammer. Yeah, it's boring it away. You can see the first pass. It may have been hammered by a piston that let loose too, or a ring that let loose and got slammed up on top the dome into the cylinder head. I don't know. The cylinder head doesn't look terrible on this one. I do have all the heads with these just to inspect them, but they look usable. And you can see that little patch there, and that's on the intake side. So that is probably where a ring broke, maybe, I would bet. That's about where a piston pin would be for a ring. And they're always on the intake side because the exhaust side has such a big hole in it, it would swallow up the ring for sure from the port if it got loose, or if the ring came out of the land too far. We'll wait till this goes down a little bit further and you'll see there's a lot of wear. You can hear it in the video too. There's a ton of wear down around the transfer ports, the intake transfer ports, and the exhaust. You can't see that because it's on the side we're filming from here. That's a funny phrase too. There's no film in this camera because it's a phone. I guess we still call it filming though. You can see the shadow right down in about where the cut's going to start right now. That's the old shadow. Excuse me. It's going to bore some of that away. But there'll be some left, especially like right in the transfer port bridging area. You'll see the shadow still remain. Yeah, there's a little bit of it right there above the intake. Get down in there. And now you can hear the void of the cut. It's not cutting, basically. It's just swinging around. Excuse me. And the cutter, that's probably within another cut. So I take about a 5/1000th cut each pass. The boring bar could withstand more, but there's no need to try and rush it. We're only boring this particular cylinder it'll be about 1 millimeter full when it's done of a full machine job. Now it's starting to cut again. The camera keeps focusing on that stud closest to it there. Now we're back. And you can see where the shadow's still going to be around that intake port, the main intake port. The cutter's just barely cutting around that transfer port there. So yeah, these old cylinders are very viable. I mean, they've got a lot of life in them. Typically, you can bore them up to, geez, I want to say 72 millimeter or so. I think stock bore is like 68 or 69. 68 millimeter comes to mind. But don't just hone it and throw a piston in it if you've got an oversized piston, because like the old phrase goes, it would be like a hot dog down the hallway here. This is typically what you'll see in an old two-stroke. There's a lot of wear around those transfer ports, around the intake and exhaust port. And, you know, generally speaking, there's a lot of, I don't know, there's a lot of controversy about porting and about polishing and whether it helps or hurts or takes away from your longevity. I say leave them stock. You know, don't try and take too much meat out of them. And the biggest thing is put the cylinder and piston clearance back to where it's supposed to be. And you're going to have, you know, even if we got done honing it and this little spot right here was still left in it, that would still run and run fine. You're not going to have any issues with it. So just little bitty imperfections in that cylinder wall would not be alarming to me to actually put them together and run them. Now, if it's a big gaping, like down there around that transfer port, if you've got a shadow like that way up on top, and this was a shadowed area that wasn't touching with the boring bar or the hone when you were done, that's a different story. You might want to seek the next oversize, or if it's already to the full oversize, you may want to think about putting a sleeve in that and or finding a different cylinder. Sleeving's getting expensive these days too. So yeah, ATC250R stuff. Getting more popular all the time. Right there's evidence. Stay tuned.